This episode of the Cherished Lounge is brought to you by Cherished LA. Cherished LA is a survivor-led nonprofit dedicated to empowering survivors of human trafficking and exploitation, while also equipping communities through education, advocacy, and hope. Through trauma-informed care, we're helping individuals discover healing, purpose, and a future filled with possibility. To learn more about our mission or get involved or support the work, visit cherishedla.org. That's www.cherishedla.org. Because every life has value and every story deserves hope. The conversations we have here on the Cherished Lounge are deeply personal to me because I don't come to them only as a host. I come to them as someone who has lived a story of my own. I share that story in my book, Exposed: Surviving the Commercial Sex Industry. Exposed is my own story of exploitation, survival, and the long journey of healing that followed. Each chapter includes reflection questions, making it something you can read on your own or walk through with a group. Exposed is a story not only about what happened to me, but about healing, identity, and finding your way back to yourself. Exposed: Surviving the Commercial Sex Industry is available in print or audiobook through Amazon or wherever you get your books. Today, I'm honored to welcome Katie Green to the Cherished Lounge. Katie is a licensed clinical social worker, certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor, and a clinically certified human trafficking victim services provider. She is also a survivor of human trafficking whose lived experience has shaped a remarkable career dedicated to helping others heal. Through her private therapy practice, Katie specializes in working with survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault, and complex trauma. Beyond her clinical work, Katie is an educator, author, national and international trainer, and a respected leader in the anti-trafficking movement. She serves as a program associate professor of social work at Grand Valley State University, has trained thousands of professionals across healthcare, law enforcement, and social services, and currently serves as a vice chair of the Michigan Human Trafficking Commission. Her voice has helped shape policy, public health initiatives, and survivor-informed practices across the country. But the reason I invited Katie isn't simply because of her impressive resume. Katie and I served together on Three Strands Global Foundation's Survivor Advisory Board. And over time, I've come to appreciate not only her expertise, but the way she bridges lived experience with clinical knowledge. Today, we're going to explore what trauma really does to the brain and why survivors respond the way they do, how healing is possible, and what all of us, whether survivors, professionals, or loved ones, need to understand about recovery. My hope is that this conversation not only brings greater understanding, but also reminds every listener that our brains can heal, our stories matter, and our identities are never defined by what happened to us. Katie, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so grateful you're here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. So Katie and I, for the listeners, served together, as I mentioned, on Three Strands Survivor Advisory Board, and that's in Sacramento, California. However, Katie is on the East Coast, and I am in California. And I've had the privilege of listening to her when we have board meetings, and also I sat in a training I think you did through World Without Exploitation. Is that right? You did a training through them?
Right.
Yeah. So, and that was right up my alley because I was listening to you talk about trauma. You were educating others on what survivors go through with trauma and the brain and what happens. And so hopefully we can get into some of that topic today because I kind of geek out on that stuff. So
Sounds
Um,
great. Absolutely.
yeah, great. So, Katie, tell us a little about yourself.
All right. Well, you did a great job introduction. I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've lived off and on here in Grand Rapids, Michigan for the majority of my life. I did spend 8 years in Florida where some of my human trafficking experience happened. It's been 23 years since my trafficking experience. So lots and lots of time in recovery, substance abuse recovery too. As a matter of fact, I got sober before I was trafficked, which is a whole nother story in itself. The other thing is I'm married. I have two kids and one stepdaughter, and I have about 4 or 5 jobs. So I love what I do. I'm passionate about providing education and direct services regarding exploitation and human trafficking. So also, I am a plant fanatic. I just got my master gardener certificate. So that was fun, in all my free time.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's therapeutic, right? Doing
Absolutely.
plants. Yeah.
Yes, pulling out weeds when you're frustrated and angry, especially the ones that don't want to come out of the ground. Absolutely.
Yeah. I always say you can kind of tell like what's going on in my life by what's happening with my plants.
I love it. I
You
love
know,
it.
if they're looking sad, then I'm doing too much and I'm not in a good headspace. So, but when the plants look happy, then things are usually going good.
That's great. That's great.
Well, so were you trafficked in Florida, you said?
Originally, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Can you tell
down
us
in
more about that
South
part of your
Florida.
story?
Yeah, first of all, I had no idea what human trafficking was. I was naive and had very much interest in rebellious activities. I was groomed by an individual who said to me, "You are so beautiful. Why are you having sex for free when you could be making money? And as a matter of fact, I'm going to teach you to not even have sex, but to steal from men." And I was like, okay, right. And I was going down there for college, and I had started college. I was in college. I was also working part time. So I learned the escort service business. Uh, this is before cell phones were such a huge thing, by the way. And there was no Cash App, right? So,
Yeah.
like back in the day, I was using a credit card swiping machine.
Oh,
And just to date that, right? So the thing happened where this individual, he was a friend of a friend. I had no idea his background really. Ended up being an ecstasy dealer. I had no idea. And the thing is that he introduced me then to the traffickers. And this was a trafficking ring down in South Florida. Um, and I was then stolen from. I had no choice of where I was going to go and what time I was going to go. There was manipulation, like, I will tell the school what you're doing because what you're doing is illegal. I will threaten your family, even though they had no idea where my family was, who my family was. It didn't matter because I believed all of their threats. And that was that coercive control that really manipulated me and kept me stuck in trafficking. As I mentioned, I was working part time and going to school full time as a college student and had no idea words to put words as to what was happening to me. And eventually, I had to leave the state of Florida in order to get away from the trafficking situation. And I moved back to Michigan for safety. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And I called up an escort system. And that took a year to get out of that system and ended up getting trafficked by a woman at that time. So you can see how, sex work can come into very naive, very just thinking it's going to be fun and extra money. and then getting manipulated and coerced into human
Mm-hmm.
trafficking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my story is a little similar to that. I also worked for an escort service for a while, and through that, actually through the strip club is when I met a boyfriend who became a pimp, but my pimp. But same thing, the threats of we'll go after your family if you don't do everything we're telling you to do, and you don't know if they really do know where your family
Mhm.
is. And so that threat feels very real.
It
And
does.
a lot of women find themselves in this industry under threat. And so I think that's something um, the general public doesn't really, they're always asking, like, can't she just leave? Why don't she just get away from it? And that's one of the reasons, right? That is
Mhm.
happening. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, and then, so then when did you become a therapist? How did that shift?
Yeah, I actually graduated over 20 years ago and was a healthcare social worker for a long time. I still had no idea what human trafficking was. It wasn't until 13, almost 14 years ago that I was sitting through a continuing education course because the state of Michigan's, which is amazing, and I think every state should do this, requires all their licensed healthcare professionals now to have human trafficking education. We are only one of 5 states across the nation that require healthcare professionals. So, anyways, I'm sitting here in this training for the first time, and I literally, not to be dramatic, but I fell out of my seat because for the first time I had words that described what was happening to me. And let me tell you, Kate, I went to therapists in the past. I talked about it with a previous doctor. They didn't know what human trafficking was. They didn't know what sex trafficking was. And so nobody told me. Nobody explained where the PTSD, the trauma, the post traumatic stress disorder was coming from. I had had it long before then, but talk about complex trauma after the result. So I sought to understand and really, start dedicated my life to prevention work. I went through EMDR myself, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, which I believe is the gold standard for treatment of trauma, no matter where you're at in the trauma processing phase. And I was then asked to join a private practice. And this was 9 years ago. And I have been doing EMDR and other trauma therapies with survivors of human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, child abuse, very dark trauma. And I can only do that part time. And I'll tell you why. It's because there is a lot of energy that is focused when it comes to trauma work. Even though I consider myself recovered from the aftermath of trauma experiences, I'm not saying that I am not triggered at any point, right? And sometimes it's just about taking a break and not allowing others to bombard you, right, with their energy. And so
Mhm.
that's what I do. I work part time as a therapist and then work on other jobs, consulting, education, healthcare, social work as well.
I love that. I love what you're doing. And yeah, so I have not done EMDR, but I have done brain spotting, um, which I forget who discovered the EMDR method, but I believe that that same person, um,
Princeton Shapiro.
thank you,
Yeah.
yes, also discovered brain spotting. And so I've done that, and I've seen I definitely saw results from doing that. But tell me more about what you personally discovered through EMDR, how that helped you.
Yeah. Well, EMDR is about shedding, I guess, if you want to say layers of beliefs that are embedded usually from childhood. Everything goes back to the childhood, right? So I'm not good enough. Nobody likes me. I'm not lovable. I'm dirty, right? And it then each of these thought processes, even if they're fear-based, are tied into a memory. And so EMDR allows the client to pair that memory and reprocess that memory with a statement that does not have any overwhelming emotion to it, right? So part of it is processing through saccadic eye rhythm. We go back and forth, right? I don't use these. I use tacks. Some people use light bars. Um, and that triggers brain waves to make connections between memories and to process things that happened. There is a reprocessing part of this, and then there is the next step in the protocol is to reveal something that is set with a positive reinforcement statement. And that positive memory, that positive reinforcement statement then uses it to replace what I was mentioning from the previous trauma statements that we have from even childhood. In my experience, the way I look back at my history is a simple word of, that was sad. And I was a totally different person. And I'm not like that anymore. And there is absolutely no overwhelming emotion attached to that. And people in recovery, true trauma recovery from their experiences, are able to have conversations like this, right, Kate? And we're not reliving our experience. We're not triggered. We're not shaking from the ability to talk about these things. No, we're cool, calm, collected, because the trauma responses have been removed from our body. They're not in fight, flight, freeze, fawn response anymore. There is no trauma bonding to the traffickers anymore. I'm not in survival mode. I have a beautiful life, a beautiful family. I'm able to, understand what happened to me was not my fault. That, of course, I was a participant in first, I guess, if you want to say signing up for everything. But then once everything happened, the manipulation, the coercion, the threats, the physical force of taking my money, that is when I lost that control. And addiction runs heavily interface with this. So recovery to me was really important, and having recovery steps. I can honestly say, though, that it wasn't until I found the language 13 years ago, 14 years ago, of what human trafficking was that I could even talk about my experiences because of the shame. And the shame is what kept me stuck for so many years. And so part of trauma recovery for me was grief work. Some grief work into shame and letting those binds of shame fall away from me.
I found in my story and others that I've worked with that it's right. It's connected to that self-contempt. And so that blame and putting themselves in a situation where they can't, they're in that loop of like, and even helping them name, this is how you're feeling about yourself, like this self-contempt. Because I would show up in rooms even years later, just very angry and pretty sure everyone in the room was against me, and that I wasn't enough and all of those feelings. So when do you recommend someone who's coming out of a life start to do some of that work? Because that's a pretty heavy dive in.
Absolutely. So I just published a toolkit with an accommodating training about mental health treatment for survivors of human trafficking. This is grounded in my personal experience, my professional experience, and what the literature says for evidence-based practices. So I suggest a phased approach to recovery and treatment. And There is no timeline of when somebody should start processing their trauma, but they have to have the necessary safety and stabilization and skills and tools built in that they can process trauma. And that
Mhm.
could take months, that could
Mhm.
take years, and that could take 20 years.
Mhm.
So there is no timeline to have the response, but like in this toolkit that I published, I talk about what readiness would look like for somebody to start processing trauma.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, because when someone first gets out, the first thing they need is safety, and to feel safe, and that can take a long time. I mean, I have the Cherished homes, and women can live there for 2 years, and it just every single person is different in how
Hmm.
when they feel safe. Some are there for almost the 2 years before they're even ready to start having some of those conversations. I mean, it's just depending on their story, their history, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And now a word from our sponsors. This episode of the Cherish Lounge is proudly sponsored by Damaris Hope. Damaris Hope is a nonprofit serving women working in the commercial sex industry and survivors of human trafficking and exploitation throughout greater Atlanta area. Their mission is simple but powerful: to meet women where they are with compassion, practical support, and hope, walking alongside them without judgment as they pursue healing and a new future. To learn more about their work or find ways to get involved, visit damarishope.org. That's DAMARISHOPE.org. Our thanks to Damaris Hope for supporting survivor voices and helping make these conversations possible. And now back to the show. So let's talk about, as you as a survivor and a therapist, what are ways that people are misunderstanding um, trauma behaviors? You know, a lot of, I'm so glad that you've written a curriculum and you've written something to help providers. But what have you found was like a missing piece that you needed to write about?
I think some of it, survivors can be misunderstood as like non-compliant. Um, their behaviors of drug use are not what we, should be looking for and focusing on. And the thing that we should be focusing on is why they're acting in these behaviors and trying to normalize people's survivor methods of behaviors are part of what they've known to survive. There's also the expectation of feeling like they need to rescue them. And some people that I have in recovery, um, where I'm just doing some skills work on them, they have left their trafficking situation, and some have not. So a lot of readiness to change is there, and that is that is a difficult place to be. But there should not be any sense of like we're going to rescue, right? Survivors don't need to be rescued.
Mhm.
They need to be given the skills and the hope and the inspiration and the community to leave their situation if they can.
Mhm.
And the other thing I really challenge mental health professionals and anybody is your own stigma and bias around sex work,
Mhm.
and that to watch their nonverbals. Nonverbals are so important when working with human trafficking survivors because any person in authority, and honestly, therapists, healthcare workers, you and me, we would be considered a person in authority because we're a professional. And so, as survivors ourselves, we know we are groomed to not trust anybody in authority.
Mhm.
And in that situation, when mental health workers are providing therapy or brief interventions, They are encouraged to watch their nonverbals right away, especially when talking about pimping and pandering and the lifestyle and sex
Mhm.
work and sex trafficking. And uh, because the majority of trafficking victims don't know that they're actually being trafficked. There's so many times I have conversations with people that I'm saying, actually, did you know this is a form of human trafficking? And they're like, no, no. Because why? Because we have preconceived notions
Mhm.
based on the media of what human trafficking looks like,
Right.
right?
Right.
And there's so many times that I have to tell that individual that, yeah, actually, this meets the definition. Let me tell you why. And then I provide some universal education on human trafficking. And whether they identify or not, that's not up for me. I know I couldn't identify right
Mhm.
away. I understood what was happening, but I had a hard time with the word survivor. I
Mhm.
really did for lots of years. I would say I'm recovered. I'm recovered. Uh, and then when I started getting more and more into the profession, I'm talking about lived experience and survivors, I really understood the community of survivor leaders. And I started self identifying as a survivor leader.
Mhm.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that was my own stigma, my own personal bias. And that could be still rooted out of shame. Who knows?
Uh-huh.
I'm not, I'm not like that anymore.
Right.
Uh, One thing else that I focus on in my trainings and in my toolkit is on trauma informed care. Okay. And trauma informed conversations. I give examples, vignettes, uh, sample questions on how to say things. Going back to, like, for example, going back to the person who we think is non compliant, instead of asking, why didn't you show up for your appointment?
Mhm.
Ask, what barriers did you face to showing up to your appointment? And it could be inside their thought process that keeps them from not showing up, or it could be literally a physical barrier, transportation, childcare, not able to leave their situation,
Mhm.
fear of walking outside. And I had many
Mhm.
clients that I had to change to virtual options if they felt safe so and they were able to have a VPN on to protect their privacy because they could not leave their house. They were so fearful of leaving their house that
Mhm.
became their safeguard.
I remember the real struggle of even I had been in Hollywood when I was in the life and leaving that area, I moved about 45 minutes out of the area up into the high desert and just leaving the house to even go to the grocery store, even though I was not even in the same area anymore. Um, because I was so used to even walking outside and maybe going someplace and running into somebody who had been a trafficker, running into
Mhm.
a client or something. And I remember just feeling this kind of like really just feeling paralyzed that
Mm,
I didn't want to walk out of the door. I didn't want to go to the grocery store. It was terrifying. And so women really do feel that. And I remember also dating myself, we didn't have cell phones. So like the phone ringing, um, for a long time, I hated being on the phone. The sound of the telephone ringing would send me into trigger me,
mm,
because I was afraid it would be a call that I would have to take, And
yeah,
so there are real small things to everyday life that people think shouldn't be there, shouldn't be a problem, that to a survivor is terrifying.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um, yeah, something else you said about the training providers with language and understanding, survivors have learned to read really well. They can
Uh-huh.
read people, and they can read the room, and that is how they have survived. So
Yes.
when they're working with service providers, and even myself, even a survivor working with survivors, I've had to recognize I might be looking at them as like, we're equal. I'm a survivor. I'm on the same level. And they're looking at me in a different way. Uh, it could be because I'm white. It could be because I'm older, and it's because I have authority, like you said. And so those are triggers for them when I'm just trying to be like, I get what you're going through. I'm here for you. But there's a lot of, those are barriers in the room that need to be recognized when we're working with survivors. So we can't just assume like, I'm not judging them, so it's fine. There's so much more going on. Maybe you're not, but they can really read if your body language and if your heart is really for them. It takes a while, but they are, even if they aren't convincing themselves, I can trust this person, they are reading you and their body is telling you things. Their body is telling them things about how they should feel in that moment. So, so you understand about the brain. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think that's so fascinating and it's helped me too to understand and to train other people that when they're working with survivors, what is actually happening in our brain when there's trauma. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, what is actually happening in the brain? So, I think, first of all, I think that the diagnosis of post traumatic stress disorder is one of the most underdiagnosed mental health DSM 5 conditions out there. And why? Because if you look at all the symptoms, and there's 20 criteria in the DSM 5, they don't have to meet all of them, but this person could be found all over the place. Depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, mania, different behaviors, right? Somatization, which is the physical feeling and physical sensation of trauma. It could be eating disorders and impulsivity. It can be drug addiction. And these ability to want to stay numb or forget everything and avoid people, places, and things, right? And so what is happening is that the amygdala, which is where we keep our fight, flight, freeze, I guess, in fawn response, starts striking out these neurons that say, you're in trouble, you're in trouble, you're in trouble. And then your body automatically sends these neurons up and down your sympathetic nervous system saying, we need to either freeze, right? Or run or fight. And the most individuals who experience some type of trauma experience, lots of them go through trauma and they don't have these symptoms. But others who go through this traumatic experience, they cannot control the way their body reacts. I'll give you an example. And there is complex PTSD in trauma experiences. They can all be layered too. So, for example, somebody who gets in a car accident may have one thought right before they're about to get hit, and that is, I'm going to die. Going forward, their body has frozen up. They feel frozen in that seat. So then let's say they go and try and drive again, and they have these constant thoughts of, I'm going to die. And my body starts acting as if I'm in this car accident or I'm about to get in this car accident again, and it starts freezing up. And the next thing you know, you're like, what is wrong with me? I'm driving fine. I'm not going to get in a car accident. But despite your thoughts that you're trying to combat this experience with, your body thinks elsewise. And it's all based on your thoughts. It's producing the same experience, physical, that you had had before. The other thing I want to mention too is that let's say that experience happens and then sexual assault happens on top of that. Another traumatic experience. So you already have the anxiety and maybe fear of being out of control in your situation. And now we're going to couple this with sexual assault. This could lead to a whole different set of symptoms. Hypervigilance, easily startled. Hypervigilance means you're always feeling alert, hyperactive, easily startled, jumpy, right? Startle response. And then your body also starts, maybe, for example, physically, it doesn't want to have intimacy anymore. It shuts down. It stops trusting people. So you have the original trauma from your car accident. Now you have this other trauma from being sexually assaulted. And now you're just having stacked upon stacked layers of trauma symptoms. And through therapy, the goal is to unravel these trauma symptoms so they're not associated with these thought processes. Like, for example, I'm going to die. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah. But it's good. It's good for people to start to, be curious about this. And, even like you mentioned, complex PTSD, that's not even in the DSM-5 yet. And so it is something we know survivors are suffering. And like you said, we're not really, because of the repetitive harm that's been done, and they're not really being understanding that, or people that are helping them aren't always understanding that because of that reason, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so what are some ways that we can actually create new pathways in our brains so that, as you've mentioned, but go a little more into that?
Yeah. So some of the new pathways have to be, first of all, set in I feel safe. And that means physically and emotionally. To start trusting themselves or ourselves, I guess, in our own judgment and judgment of others, because that can be taken away too, especially with sex trafficking and controlling and being controlled and labor trafficking. The other thing is to trust in the providers, healthcare providers, therapists, counselors. The other thing is to start to build a community. I really felt that my recovery jumped to a whole new place once I had community of support of others like me. And I could understand that what they're going through is the same thought processes that I had. And I would say, well, how do you deal with that now? Like, what do you do when this happens now? And they were able to tell me. So, for example, when I felt scared of going out places by myself, somebody suggested to me that I keep my cell phone on me and open. And if I ever feel like I need to call somebody right away, I know exactly who to call. And at that time, it was a girlfriend. And the that little things, those little things really helped in the beginning. Trust was hard. Trust was really hard to build, but I know that those links that I had in my brain with starting to trust myself, starting to look for a bigger picture, like what happened to me was wrong and not my fault, that I don't have to continue in this lifestyle. Those challenging thoughts started making new brain dendrites, if you want to say, where these thought processes then you've been used to challenge. The other thing is that I used a lot of distraction, especially with my hands at first, to distract myself from any overwhelming somatic physical feelings, like where I wanted to feel like I was going to crawl out of my body, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And that really helped as well. Distraction does work, especially in the immediate grounding needed. But it was little things like cleaning or baking or making something,
Working
right?
with plants.
Yes, planting. That's when I really got into planting. And those also try to say, okay, guess what? We are not experiencing this trauma at this moment, this traumatic experience.
Mm.
It was also learning what I liked and disliked. I had to start rebuilding those things as well as far as activities go. And again, building that community to say what happened to you, happened to us too. And this is how we're recovering and you can recover too.
So good. And that is same for me, true for me, that meeting other survivors that are walking through healing, that are taking brave steps and stepping out and actually using their past to fuel, as we are, our future and to help others. That there's been a lot of healing in that. There's been a lot of healing walking along other survivors. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm so grateful for that, and so grateful to have you and to have other survivors in our lives that we can reach out to. If somebody is interested in doing EMDR, can you do that over Zoom? Do they need to live near you?
Uh, yeah, I can do this virtually, but I can only do it virtually with individuals who live in Florida and Michigan, because
Okay.
I'm only licensed in Florida and Michigan.
Okay.
Hmm.
So for those who live in Florida or Michigan, reach out for Katie and she can help you with that. If you do not live in those areas, research EMDR
Hmm.
and think about maybe that might be a next step for you in your
Hmm.
recovery.
Hmm.
Again, as Katie said, making sure that other things are in place, that you are safe. I wouldn't recommend this if you just are hearing this and you are still in the life and just trying to decide, contemplating on your next steps. It's not time for that yet, but
Hmm.
we encourage you to take steps and move in that direction, that you could eventually seek out some help in that way.
Yes. And there are resources out there who vet therapists, and they are specific for human trafficking survivors. So uh, I will definitely let you know about those.
Okay. We will definitely have all of Katie's information at the end of this podcast, and ways to reach out to her and to learn more. So Katie, did I hear you just started a consulting business?
I did. Well, I started the consulting business a year ago called
Okay.
KTP Empowerment. It's was my initials. And the what happened is I continued to reach out over and over again to different agencies to provide education. And then I became a World Without Exploitation Stand Cohort 3 member, and started being a HEAL Trafficking national and international training provider, and doing more and more consultation training. But then I realized that one of the gaps is mental health and substance use disorder professionals. So then I created a website, built an online on demand training course, as well as a toolkit. My next training course I'm going to build is on the flash technique. If you've ever heard of it, I would consider it more of a phase two tool building technique to use with survivors of human trafficking. And I made my own adaptation of the script of how to do the flash technique. And what is great about the flash technique is that you don't have to be a licensed therapist to do this technique with people who have experienced trauma. So that is in the works right now.
Well, I definitely want that. I definitely want to get my hands on that for myself. So, um, thank you, Katie, for being here. As we close, what is something that you would like to tell survivors who are listening? Maybe you want to speak to survivors who are just thinking about leaving, and maybe survivors who have been on this journey and don't know what their next steps are.
Absolutely. So, for people who are thinking about leaving, know that there is a community of survivors out there that believe you, listen to you, and can walk this journey of recovery with you. Uh, you can reach out to myself or Kate for this information. Also, for those who have been out of the life for a long time, but not really sure where they should go, for their trauma therapy. Again, some resources about vetted therapists who work specifically with human trafficking is really essential, and we can put that information in the chat. The other thing is to know that it's never too late to process trauma, and the more and more we avoid it, the more physical ailments we will experience as the result. And it's okay to talk about trauma. It's not as if it's going to happen again. And I think there's so much fear in that, to avoid those overwhelming emotions. And also, for any professionals that are listening to this, I'd like to say to please look beyond your first impression. The person that is presenting to you, who you consider maybe using substances or a streetwalker or a sex worker, human trafficking may also be occurring at the same time. So again, look beyond your first impression.
That's so
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed this. If anyone listening has any other questions, you can put them in the chat, and we will have Katie back and answer more of those questions. So thank you so much, Katie, for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cherished Lounge. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. New episodes premiere every Tuesday. Recorded and produced by Robert Altschuler at Command Creative Studios. Music by Danny Keene and Doug Maxwell. We'll see you next time in the Cherished Lounge, where soul, story, and wild grace meet.